So hello everyone, and welcome to the first session. So I hope you have the energy because it's the first session. So today we'll be discussing application deployment to Kubernetes made easy using Acorn, and we'll go from the basics and see how it works. So a bit about myself. I'm a director of technical evangelism at Civo. So Civo is a cloud provider that provides managed Kubernetes offering based on K3s. And I'm a CNCF ambassador. I'm active over different social media platforms, Twitter and YouTube, creating videos, and the community called Cube Simplifier. So you can kind of connect with me everywhere. I mean, you should connect with me with everywhere. So let's take a step back and try to first understand where are we, because over the years, the set of challenges have changed. So first, we were writing monolithic applications, deploying it to servers. We were happy. Everything was working fine. And then there were certain set of challenges like, how do we write multiple microservices in different set of languages, and so on and so forth. So we moved toward an era of microservices. I mean, there are still transition obviously going on, but now most of the projects that are getting started, people are starting with a microservices API-driven approach. Now, even after getting to the microservices stage in 2013-14 era, we started the containerization ecosystem. So like Docker was introduced, that changed the whole game of containerizing your application, packaging your application as containers and run them anywhere. And that brought, again, different set of challenges. Like you have the containers, so now how do you use those containers to scale? How do you have your dev, test, stage environments with all those containers which are there? So you need an orchestrator for that. And that's where Kubernetes came in. And over the years, obviously there have been different players, but Kubernetes have emerged due to its extensibility, stability, auto-scaling, and all those fancy capabilities, kind of the de facto standard. Now we have Kubernetes, but another set of challenges, like how to actually use it, how to install it, how to get it at a huge scale. And that's where a lot of cloud providers came in, and they started working on managed Kubernetes offerings so that you don't have to go through the pain of setting up the clusters, because setting up the cluster was not that easy. Now there are like different tools that helps you set up in an easy way, but it was not easy. So those were some of the challenges, and then Rancher, Portainer, helping, acting as a single pane of glass for multi-Kubernetes cluster and multi-cloud. So all this is fine. Now, where we are, the current issue is with the deployment. Now we have the infrastructure layer. So I would suggest, like, if anybody is starting out with Kubernetes, just go with any of the managed Kubernetes offering, because they are stable. They are backed up by the cloud provider. They are managing it. So you can focus on the application deployment. But again, when it comes to Kubernetes and application deployment, you need to learn a lot of concepts. So let's say you have to deploy an app A. And to deploy that application on Kubernetes, you need to learn a lot of core Kubernetes concepts, like what is an object, what is a deployment, what is a replica set, how do you expose it as a service, then how do you expose it to the outside world as an ingress. For that, you need ingress controller, then certificate management, let's encrypt, cert manager. So there are tons of concepts that you need to go through in order to deploy even a simple Hello World application. So this is the area where we are seeing a lot of companies doing some sort of innovations, that they want a single file or a single way to describe your application, and then it should be deployed to any Kubernetes cluster. Now that's where Acorn fits in. So Acorn lets you to deploy your Kubernetes deploy application on Kubernetes across environments using a single file. So you can use a single Acorn file. So Acorn file is basically a schema for your application, like how your application should look like, what all images you need to use, what all dependencies it should be having, environment variables, secrets, volumes, and all those stuff. But you don't need to understand the Kubernetes concepts. And yes, that was the main kind of ideology behind creating Acorn. So what is Acorn? Deployment to production simplified, because there is a single file, Acorn file, that we'll be using with minimal set of configurations that is required to deploy the application to Kubernetes. No need to learn complex YAML files. You don't need to understand how the YAML file will work, adding the annotation, secrets, config maps, volumes, all these concepts that itself is a learning curve when you're learning Kubernetes. Then minimal file to define application. This is the Acorn file. Acorn file can deploy everything from stateless to stateful applications with full support. Auto TLS and encrypted secrets, which was just released in Acorn 0.3, but a very powerful feature. So you get HTTPS out of the box for your application that is deployed, which is amazing. And you can encrypt the secrets and then use that inside your application at runtime. So this is how an Acorn file looks like. So you can see you have, I mean, it's very readable. So that's a different kind of DSL, which is derived from a Q language. And it provides you a lot of flexibility. You can do a lot of if-else conditions on top of that. And you can know Kubernetes or YAML knowledge required. And it has built-in security best practices with respect to like isolation of the namespace. You can break it down to a level where a developer only has access to a certain namespace when they are deploying the application. So that sort of security is built in. And it is not for the infra layer, because infra layer issues are already been worked and very mature services, managed services by the cloud providers, which are out there, like EKS, Civo Kubernetes. All these are already out there. Now you can just see in this application, there is, like, we need to deploy the container. And it's web, and we are building from the current directory, means we need an Acorn file in the current directory. We can give the image name if it's pre there, like Postgres, Redis, already from a different registry. We can use that as well. And then we can, based on the complex use cases, we can increase the level of complexity, like this depends on a DB, this depends on certain credentials, environment variables, all these can be introduced. But you can see how simple. So this file, this single file can deploy an application with HTTPS onto Kubernetes cluster. And I'll show you that. So the workflow looks like you write an Acorn file, and all the Acorn components that will be installed onto the cluster. You will be, from the Acorn file, there will be an Acorn image, which is called the artifact, OCI compliant artifact that will be creating. Now, this artifact can be a single Docker image or combination of Docker image, following the same principles. Like if you know Docker, you are, like, developers are well versed with Docker. They love Docker Compose. Following the same principle of Docker Compose, you even have same fields, like depends on from Docker Compose. There's a depends on field in Acorn file as well. So it follows a lot of similarities from the Docker ecosystem and the Docker Compose ecosystem. After you have the Acorn image, you can push that to the OCI registry, any OCI compliant registry, GCR, Docker registry. So you can, push your artifact over there. And you can also do it in the internal registry. Like if you haven't specified anything, it will be creating an internal registry and, pushing your artifact over there. And then your Acorn runtime, which is the controller that will be responsible for taking that Acorn image and unpacking it into different Kubernetes components. Now, when the application will be deployed, you will be able to actually see, if you know Kubernetes and you are interacting with that the deployment is created, the service is created, the ingress is created, all these components are there and ready for you, and you don't have to manage them. So this is a high-level architecture. How do you interact is by the Acorn CLI. So you will be installing Acorn CLI. You can use that inside your GitHub Actions or on your laptop, and you'll be pushing out commands from there. Now, it uses the API aggregation, which is like, it has its own API server, which is the Acorn API server. So any request that is sent from Kube API server, it goes to the Acorn API server and then goes to the controller for taking care of all the actions that you want. And then you can see the pod. The build kit is the pod that will be building your image. And you have the internal registry if you haven't supplied any of the external artifact registry, OCI compliant, which is there. So that's a high-level architecture of that, of Acorn, how it works. So mainly, there are only two things. One, Acorn API server that gets installed onto your Kubernetes cluster. Second, you have the Acorn controller. So 2 pods you'll be able to see in your Kubernetes cluster when you do the Acorn install. Now, okay, we understand okay, Acorn simplifies a lot of concepts. Acorn simplifies the application deployment, but you today need to take back something and apply it in some of the scenarios. So I feel scenarios are a great way to understand how you can actually use Acorn in your existing systems or with the new application. So let's say you write an Acorn file first, and you define your application structure. So first stanza, you will be defining your build. Like you want to build from the current directory Docker file, or you want to build from an image which is pre-existing. Then you define some of the environment. Environment can be, you can pass them or via Acorn run, or you can define the arguments in some of the variables. Then you will be needing some secrets. So Acorn has a concept of built-in secrets. So you can use that. You can also use Kubernetes secrets. Can be defined at runtime, and you can encrypt that as well from Acorn 0.3 onwards. Then you can have conditional. So let's say you have some arguments, and based on that arguments, you can actually have if-else conditional statements that you can conduct. Like if no argument was passed, then you can define a default value for that. So all these things can be there. You can publish a port. So you can see there are 3 kinds of port. Like you can publish internal port, you can publish the service port, and you can use all those 3. And that will be deploying the app. And you can deploy the app to different contexts. So that is very interesting. So if you rewind back, there was Acorn build that was happening. So that build can happen on a separate cluster, and your deployment can happen to different clusters, and you can choose different contexts like dev, test, stage, prod, and you can choose different contexts to deploy it to different Kubernetes cluster based on different set of arguments that you need to pass at runtime. So you can have different arguments that you are passing, different secrets that you are passing at runtime for different environments and for different contexts for your Kubernetes cluster. So that's where Acorn as a single file can be used to deploy from dev to prod using a single Acorn file. Another scenario can be where you have an application Docker file, and then you write an Acorn file that builds from that Docker file, and it also uses a database. So that's a stateful workload that you want to use, or an external database that you want to use. You can actually use that. You can also define standard images, like you can directly use Postgres and then its credentials as the environment variable, picking up from the secrets the password. And then when you do Acorn build can happen, that I explained earlier itself. Build can happen on dev cluster, and run can happen on test, dev, and prod. An artifact with all images. So Acorn build will be creating the artifact with all the images that you have defined in a single Acorn file. Another scenario, this was the one that was recently introduced, called encrypted secrets. So from Acorn 0.3, you can actually create a secret, like encrypt the secret, create that, and pass that encrypted secret on runtime, which will be decrypted when it goes to the application. So that is a very good way of working with secrets. You can also integrate Acorn with Vault. Like you can use HashiCorp Vault if you're already having your secret management system working over there, and you can use secrets from that. And you can see the Acorn file hasn't changed that much. So you have defined args, which are password. And then in the containers, you are using an Alpine image, so you're not building it. You are just using a plain image, and your password comes from secret. And secrets, you are using the Acorn secret. So if you go to the next block, you can see a secret called user password, type, opaque, and data password coming from the args.password. And that args you will be passing from the Acorn run command. That's the third one, Acorn run, my pass, user password, and dot means the current context to find the Acorn file. Again, so Acorn is coming from the team who actually built Rancher, K3s. So they have done already the significant amount of contributions in the ecosystem, in the cloud native community. So that's the team who is building up Acorn and solving this particular challenge. So naturally, they have been used to listening to the community as per the usage. And that is where you can see from 2.0, they have ease.installation. You can list the image. So you can do Acorn container images list or some command like that. And that exact listing you can pass to the image scanning tools like Trivi to perform the image scanning on top of that. And then labels and annotation. So often in your deployment file, you would need to add some sort of labels and annotation. So Acorn 0.2 provided that native built-in support to give some sort of annotation. Classic example would be again Vault. Like if you want to use Vault, you can add certain level of annotations to your container, and that will be added to the deployment file. Then 0.3 we have discussed, one feature we have discussed in detail, which is encrypted secrets. Other one is auto TLS. So when you install Acorn using the auto TLS, it will use the Let's Encrypt to automatically give you the certificates. The good part is it doesn't install anything onto your cluster like Cert Manager or things like that. That is built into the Acorn controller. So it's only, again, the 2 pods that will be running on your Kubernetes cluster, and nothing apart from that. And still you will be able to get for your application the HTTPS, which is good, because else you need to actually create a certificate, a cluster issuer, install Cert Manager, and then get the certificate for your particular domain or the application, and then create the ingress. So that's how the long process is to even get single certificate. And here you can actually get the certificate. Once you install, you will be asked for an email ID, and that's it. Now, I was saying that this space is being explored, and this space is being getting more and more innovation. So there are other tools, Waypoint, Dagger, Catch, that are also simplifying the same application deployment on Kubernetes made easy. So we'll discuss one, which is let's revisit the current workflow with respect to Waypoint. So you have code, then from code you build, and what happens is there are different environments. So Acorn is focused on Kubernetes, but there are other environments, like you have Lambda, you have Cloud Run, you have Kubernetes, you have Nomad, where people are deploying applications. And for each application, there is a different set of tooling. You need to run gcloud, you need to learn Terraform, or you need to learn kubectl. So all these things you have to learn if you have to work with different set of platforms for deploying the application. So what Waypoint aims to do is it bridges the gap in a way that you can actually use a single waypoint.html file to target to different platforms, which is, again, a very interesting concept. And with the help of single file, you should be able to, again, single minimal file that defines how your application should look like, build, deploy, and release 3 stanzas, and you can define where your application should be deployed. You can deploy to Kubernetes, Lambda, Nomad, Docker, Cloud Run. All these is actually supported by the plugins, built-in plugins with respect to Waypoint, which are there. So yeah, the first thing that happens in Acorn is you install Acorn, and you do the Acorn run, and obviously you need to create the Acorn file that I showed in the first slide. So that will automatically build and give you the endpoint that you can hit onto the cluster. So I can actually show you that. So you can see this is the Acorn file, which is a simple container. And if the Acorn run takes a bit more time, or the internet connectivity is not fine, I think I already have something running. So you can see the build has started, it is building. It will automatically create a new name. Just like you create a Docker image, it automatically creates a name for your Docker image. Same principles. Acorn application name will be created. Yeah, I think some internet issue is there, so it's not able to connect. No app is currently deployed, but this is how you deploy. I can deploy the application once again just to let you know. But Acorn, I can show you one more thing. So you can see the command line. It's similar to what Docker provides. Like you can build, you can check the containers, you can exec, you can log into the registry, you can run, pull, push, get the logs. So all the basic stuff which is there, very similar, following a similar pattern and the architecture of of Docker. That's what Acorn does. So it's not happening at the moment, but it does work. So yeah, that's pretty much it with respect to Kubernetes deployment made easy using Acorn. And if you have any queries with respect to that, feel free to ask me out. I would be happy to tell you. Thank you so much for attending the session, and over to you.
So Saiyam, I have a question. So
Yep.
in the past few years, we've noticed the cloud native computing as a domain has exploded, and it started with Kubernetes, I think 5, 6 years ago. And then today we have hundreds of projects that involve thousands of companies and tens of thousands of developers. And it actually grew so much to a point where there are ambassadors to go and evangelize the technologies. So for the people in the audience today who are not necessarily deep on the technical side, and they're curious and they're kind of interested in exploring the space, as a CNCF ambassador, what would be your advice to them on how to go and get started and teach yourself? Because there are a ton of resources out there, and this is not something you need a university for.
Yeah, so yes, Kubernetes, sorry, the CNCF landscape is overwhelming. You have, you know, hundreds of projects out there, lots of companies working towards, targeting a specific use case. And then there are various courses out there that helps you get started with Kubernetes, with CNCF, with cloud native ecosystem. So there are different stages of projects you can get involved. So there are multiple ways to get involved, not only with respect to the code. So you can do code contribution, you can do docs contribution, you can be contributing to the Kubernetes release team. So Kubernetes has become kind of a de facto standard, and then to solve all the other challenges that comes with Kubernetes, there are a lot of CNCF projects which are out there and which are surrounded and supporting Kubernetes and helping out even like monitoring, security, auto-scaling, chaos engineering. So then for each domain, there are multiple projects and multiple companies which are backing. So I think it's a very rich, very vast community that is out there. And if someone can present my screen, my application is actually deployed so that people can people can see. Yeah, so you should check out cncf.io. I think KubeCon is coming up in Detroit. Make sure to go to such events. GuideX is one. Very happy that Cloud and Kubernetes Day is happening here, so that we and other speakers are coming here to share our experiences, our journey, what we have learned over the years. And yeah, it is a very encouraging community. Like anybody can join and ask any sort of question, and you will find someone and even experienced people to help you out and get started. So even if you ask like, where do I get started? It's not that somebody will not reply. Somebody will reply, okay, join this Slack channel, join this community, join this Discord channel. Some reply will definitely come to you. That's the power of CNCF, and especially an inclusive community which they have, they have created, and it's at scale, which is very difficult to create. So yeah, I think you should definitely join CNCF, be part of the projects, be part of Kubernetes and all the other ecosystem. So I'll not take much time, and I'll give Justin, because he has amazing setup over here, the mystery box.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Just show my slide once, my presentation once, so that I can show that my application is deployed. Okay, so here's the application that is deployed, and you can see the HTTPS endpoint, which is there. And if I just hit that, so you can see Acorn app demo on Civo Kubernetes. So that's how easy it was to build and get an HTTPS for our application deployed onto the Kubernetes cluster within a few minutes with just 5 lines of Acorn file that you have written. Thank you so much.